of New Minister Amy Adams. Thank you.
I understand the next call is a split call for 5 minutes between Labor and the Greens. I will ring a bell with 1 minute to go. Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I only intend to take a fairly brief call on the electronic identity verification bill. Not that brief, Mr Hennedy, not that brief. That sort of woke him up, I guess. But and the more he interjects, the longer it gets. He never learns from history. But Mr Speaker, the Labor Party will certainly be supporting this bill to select committee because we think there are some very worthwhile elements in it. Increasingly, citizens of this country interact with government departments online, and that's something that it's inevitable that trend is going to continue and get larger, and we want to make that as easy as possible for people. It is a fairly constant gripe from people that government departments often require the reproduction of huge volumes of information, in many cases simply from other government departments. And this potentially, I think, starts us down a track which says the government itself needs to think a little bit more carefully about how it shares information between agencies so that people don't have to constantly go to one agency, get some information held by one agency in order to give it to another government agency, which is one of the constant bugbears of constituents who come into any constituency member's office. Now, we need to be very careful in the way we do that. This is a very, I think, conservative first step, which is simply around the verification of identity. But if it works, and if it's proven to be successful and sufficient safeguards are in place, there is actually potential for for this to expand further. Now, I know that there will be a certain number of George Orwellian figures out there who will be very concerned that this is the government coming to take over their lives and that we're going to be storing all this huge array of information on every individual citizen. Government holds a whole lot of that information anyway. It's just the government's not very efficient at communicating with itself about what information it actually holds. To return to my original point, safeguards are going to be, really important in how we use this information and how we deal with it. The public service, I think, needs to be moving to a much more citizen-focused, seamless approach to service delivery. I think it really frustrates individual citizens when, in dealing with different government agencies, they're constantly being given the runaround. They're constantly having to reproduce the same information over and over again. It very much creates the impression that government agencies, within government agencies, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And that's something that any modernised and more efficient public service is going to have to deal with. It certainly makes sense to introduce this legislation so that we don't have a whole lot of different government agencies going out and establishing their own identity verification services, because that would obviously be very costly. I was particularly interested, though, to look at when this bill is going to be coming into force, because I know that the Minister in charge of this bill, Amy Adams, was a very diligent member of the Regulations Review Committee in the last Parliament, and as part of the responsibilities of the Regulations Review Committee, one of the things they look at is when a bill's going to come into force. And one of the things the Regulations Review Committee frowns upon quite seriously are bills where the commencement date for them is unclear or where it is subject to ministerial prerogative. So where ministers can simply decide when a law comes into effect. So it's kind of ironic that having been such an ardent supporter of the Regulations Review Committee's work in this area, the very first bill that Amy Adams is bringing to this House in her new ministerial role contains exactly such a clause, which allows this new law, to come into effect at such time as an order in council is made, rather than at a specified date. So basically it removes the power to determine when a law comes into effect from the Parliament and gives it to the executive, to a minister. And that is something that the Regulations Review Committee frowns upon quite seriously. And so I think we very seriously, the chair of the Regulations Review Committee, I can tell, is very concerned about it. And I'm sure that's something that the Select Committee will need to examine in great detail when it goes to the Select Committee. And I'm sure the Regulations Review Committee, as it always does, will have a view on that particular matter. And it will be expressed, I'm sure. So overall, I think The bill is a fairly welcome step. We need to proceed with some caution. I'm sure the Select Committee will be very diligent in going through, considering the privacy implications of the bill and ensuring that, in fact, this bill doesn't take us down the wrong track. And I think overall, on that basis, the Labour Party certainly is happy to support the first reading and referral to a Select Committee.
Is there any further speakers? Right, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Electronic Identity Verification Bill, first reading.
The question is that the Electronic Identity Verification Bill be considered by the Government Administration Committee. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Speaker.
The Honourable Amy Adams.
Speaker, I move that the Electronic Identity Verification Bill be reported back to the House by the 29th of June 2012.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Call on Government Order of the Day number 4.